Music to the noise, yeah, the mess we make. Machine Pun Kelly, get caught in the fake. Facts and logic with a twist of chest. Strip it down to truth, yeah, forget the rest. You propose the lies right out of the park. Look beyond the shadows that set the dark. Sparks of laughter fire up the night, bringing clarity when they blur the fight. Cut through the chaos, yeah, the tangled lies. Machine Pun Kelly with a set of clear eyes. Truths and jokes gonna rock this show. Step into light where the real facts glow.
Hello. Thanks for joining us today. I am Machine Pun Kelly, and today we are joined by Teri Albert and to talk about DEI. And Teri, your pronouns are they, there, is that right?
She, he, they, them, whatever you want.
Well, okay. I was just going based on what you had on your webpage there. So I always like to start off with a little bit of an icebreaker. And so today's icebreaker is name the last movie or TV show that had a death that made you just full on snot, or it doesn't have to be the last one, just a movie or TV show where a death of a character just made you full blown snot cry.
Oh God. Well, right now I'm rewatching Babylon 5.
Nice.
Mainly because I love the storyline of it, and there's a death in it that just absolutely killed me, which was the death of Marcus.
Yeah. That show that is, I think, top 5 sci-fi program all time. Babylon
Right?
5.
Yep.
It's underrated. I don't know if kids today watch that. That was a good show. That was they really did a good job of developing
It was an amazing show. I thought it was way ahead of its time as far as political content.
Mm-hmm.
The sci-fi, the CGI on it was kind of but this was back in the 90s. So
Yeah.
I'll forgive it that, but the writing and the content of J. Michael Straczynski was just fantastic.
That show and Farscape are two shows I feel like if they had been able to be done in the HD era, the visuals would just have been amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But SD just didn't give them enough platform to really shine the way they could have. So anyway,
I agree.
Mine was Brian's Song. I don't know if you've ever seen Brian's Song, but Brian Piccolo, when he died, it's based on a true story. He was a football player, and he died of cancer. So
yeah.
All right. So he was real close friends with was it Gale Sayers? And they were really close, and he really helped with NFL integration because of their relationship and stuff. So it was really good. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about DEI and MEI. And can you tell us a little bit, what is your background here? How do you know what you're talking about? And can you share a little bit about your experience starting your business and why you started your business?
Sure, absolutely. So I've lived in marginalized communities all of my life. I am a member of the LGBT community. I'm non-binary. I'm queer. Um, I'm also a member of the disabled and neurodivergent communities. I'm autistic. I have multiple chronic illnesses. Um, and about not quite 4.5 years ago, I was invited by the company I was working for at the time to start an employee resource group. And they said, pick one. So I chose LGBT because it's very close to my heart. I had recently just come out. And I ran that organization for.
Had you just recently
come out as
queer or trans?
Yes.
Or both?
Queer.
Queer. Okay.
Queer. Yeah. Queer, and interestingly, polyamorous. I'm also polyamorous.
Okay.
So I ran that ERG for about 3.5 years. And when I was let go from that company after a layoff, I was talking with a friend who was like, hey, do you do public speaking? Hadn't really thought about it, but I was like, yeah, I suppose I could. They were needing somebody for one of their ERG's Pride events and asked if I'd come in and speak on Transgender 101, kind of give a breakdown of what being trans looks like. So I thought, okay, well, if I can publicly speak on various and sundry DEI topics, I can consult on various and sundry DEI topics. So let's start a business. And so that's what I did. And now I'm expanding that out even more into not just DEI, but process development, project management, all the things that I've done over the course of my career that I've got knowledge and experience in. So that's really where I'm at and what I do and what I talk about. And I'm very passionate about DEI and what being diverse or a member of a marginalized community can do and how it can benefit companies and why it's a good thing.
So I was looking at.
I'm also an anthropologist by degree.
Oh wow!
So,
well, so so my next question is related to I was looking at your website and I had asked you about this question online, or I had asked you about this question earlier, and I'm just going to post the link to your website so people can see it or go to it if they want.
Sure.
And the thing I was noticing is you've got a wait, is that you've got where did it go? In your facts section, you've got diversity, equity, and inclusion. And wait, where did that go? Now I can't find it. Anyway, you have on there, somewhere on there, a bunch of different aspects of different types of people that are considered part of the diversity or whatever. Like you have handicapped people, and then you have things that I hadn't even considered, like overweight people. And so then I was I was thinking myself, okay, well, some other things that people might not realize that are just different things you don't have any control over, that have absolutely nothing to do with job performance. And so like height makes a big difference in terms of how much money you make. Like there's, for every inch, there's like 1 or 2% income increase. There is our income difference. There's personal, like just conventional attractiveness. The better looking you are, the more money you make. Like, you know, conventionally unattractive people are penalized. There's like ugly people get paid less, beautiful people get paid more.
Yep.
Even though, you know, it has nothing to do with your quality of work or merit or anything like that. So I think when we talk about, and I asked you, one of the things I noticed was you didn't even have race on there as one of the aspects of diversity. And I asked you why not, and you said because you don't have any experience being black, which, you know, makes sense. But can you explain when I think like Elon Musk and Donald Trump have tried to make it sound like DEI is just giving money to or giving jobs to unqualified black people? Can you explain more about what diversity means versus the way it's been portrayed by right-wing media and nut jobs?
Sure. So if you're not familiar with the term, there's a new term that's kind of been floated around called MEI, which is merit, excellence, and intelligence. And this is a counter DEI term, if you will, that was coined by Elon Musk and Alexander Wang. And
Who is Alexander Way? I haven't.
Alexander Wang. He's another right-wing individual. There's actually a really great article in my blog post that I've provided detailing what Wang means. And, you know, a lot of people think, well, isn't merit and excellence a good thing? I mean, you know, we want to hire smart people. We want to hire intelligent people. And yes, absolutely, merit is a great thing. You want to have people who have the right skills and the right brains to do what they need to do in the role you're hiring them for. Absolutely. However, DEI and MEI are not the same thing, number one. And you do not necessarily want to hire a person solely for their merit, their excellence, or their intelligence. Those are part of it, yes. But
And
it's not
all vague on what like merit means, right?
right.
Like when they talk about merit, they're talking about certain things, but there's things that they don't talk about that some people might consider merit.
Right, exactly. But there's a lot of other things that go into hiring a person or having an employee than just, are they smart enough to do the job, or are they excellent enough to do the job? You need things like, are they emotionally intelligent enough? Because intelligence isn't just your intellect, it's also your emotional intelligence. Do you have the ability to regulate and understand other people's emotions? This is something I think that's really critical, especially if you're hiring a manager, a leader, somebody who's public facing, any of those kind of roles. You got to have somebody with the right level of emotional intelligence. People skills. You may have, you know, and I'm sure we've all seen this. You know, you've got a guy who gets hired for a technical job, and he's great at the technical job, right? And over the years, you know, gets promoted. Eventually, somebody decides, hey, this guy's really good at this technical job. Let's make him a manager. Bring him in as a manager, and he's terrible. And it's not because his technical skills are bad, it's because his people skills are bad. You can be absolutely fantastic in a technical role and have zero people skills. And I know plenty of people like that. It doesn't mean that they're not hireable, that they aren't intelligent, that they don't have excellence. It means they're not the right fit for certain types of jobs. And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay? Corporate culture. Are they going to fit into your corporate culture? Every organization has a culture. You put more than 3 people in a room together, you're going to have culture. Just the way it is, right? And if you've got somebody who doesn't fit into that corporate culture, then all of that good work you've done to build that corporate culture, that healthy culture, is going to go in the garbage.
Right.
Okay. And then, things like the role and the skill fit. So making sure that the person has the right skills in the right areas. So if you've got somebody who is like a data analyst, they don't necessarily need to have high people skills because they build reports all day or they do data analysis all day. Whereas if you've got, say, a technical person who goes out and works with customers to deliver a project, they've got to have more people skills.
Right.
They've got to have more emotional intelligence. So it's that combination of all of those things that are important to consider when you're hiring a new employee or looking to promote a new employee, an employee into a new space, what have you. Those are all things that are important. You're trying to focus on one single thing, and people aren't unidimensional.
I was also thinking like an example would be you have like Tyrone and Chad both applying for college, and Tyrone,
Mm.
Chad's SAT scores are a little bit higher, his grades are a little bit better, but they're not like in another world better. Tyrone had like his mom, he has a single mom and two brothers, and so he works a part-time job after school to try and help support his little brothers. And then after dinner, because his mom is working two jobs, he helps his little brothers with their homework. Then after all of that, then he does his homework before he goes to bed, and he only gets like 6 hours of sleep a night. Then he goes to an inferior school, and that is underfunded, and he gets nearly as good of grades and does nearly as good of a job as Chad. Meanwhile, Chad, his parents make $500,000 a year. He has a tutor that tutored him in the SATs, and so he studied really hard for the SATs. He doesn't have to work or anything. He just gets a big allowance, and so he's able to do all these after school programs that bolster his college credentials. And it's not to say that Chad is not. I think sometimes people will say, well, Chad isn't doing something wrong. What's he supposed to do? It's not to say that Chad is falling short in the merit range. It's just, is there a way to also look at what Tyrone's doing and looking at, like he doesn't get credit for the part-time job or helping his mom or tutoring his little brothers or not being able to, like there's studying for the SATs makes a big difference, but you have to have time and you have to have money to get a tutor. Like, I think when we talk about merit, sometimes we're talking about, we want to make things like a test score as though it's like this hard, fast rule when it's not. And there's a lot of merit that can get done. The other thing that like when I was reading up about MEI, I hadn't heard about it before, that kind of annoyed me, is that there's this assumption that if a person of color gets hired, it's in spite of their lack of merit and not they had merit. Like, it is illegal to and it's unconstitutional to not hire a qualified person and hire a qualified person, or hire an unqualified person over a qualified person due to race. Like, that's illegal and unconstitutional. Unqualified people are not getting hired. Everybody there are no unqualified black pilots flying around, Charlie Kirk. Like, so like, and what you're talking about too is just merit. It's more than just an IQ test or some kind of hard score. But Musk, like, honestly, would you hire Elon Musk to work in your business as a manager?
Truthfully, no, I wouldn't.
Because he doesn't seem to have a lot of the things you're talking about. Like, I would not want him dealing with other customers. or destroying my employees.
No. No. Yeah. No. So the situation that you just described, okay, that looks at privilege. Okay. And privilege works magic on a lot of things. Okay. So Chad, you talk about, number one, he's got 2 parents. May or may not have any other siblings. Doesn't sound like he does. He's an only child. That's a level of privilege. He has a much more stably financial household income. That's a level of privilege. He has a tutor. That's a level of privilege. All of those levels of privilege remove barriers to achieving a goal. So I actually saw a really great cartoon, meme, whatever you want to call it, the other day about what DEI looks like and what it does. So picture a racetrack and you've got 2 lanes. Okay. Chad is in one lane and Tyrone is in the other lane. I'm sorry?
I love this analogy. I bet it's the one you're thinking of.
Yeah. So in Chad's lane, you've got 2 little hurdles and you've got some wiggle room around those hurdles so that he could probably go, just around them instead of having to go over them. Whereas Tyrone's lane is filled with, marshland and weeds and grass and fences and barbed wire and all these other things that create practically an obstacle course for him to try to get through. And that's everything in his life. Those are barriers, right? So the lack of income, the having to help, give his time to help his siblings, the having to work a job to help support his family. Those are all barriers to his education and being able to achieve the goal of a good SAT grade, right?
Yeah.
DEI, and we're going to go with the assumption that their intelligence, their intellectual intelligence, is roughly the same, right? We're going to say that they're roughly the same as far as what's in their brain, okay? What DEI does is removes those barriers from Tyrone's path in order for him to have the same level of opportunity as Chad, or at least a more similar level of opportunity as Chad. Now, are you ever going to be able to make them exactly the same? No. But are you going to make it easier for Tyrone to achieve the same results and for people to see those same results? Yes.
And the same thing would apply if instead of Tyrone, it was Will Hunting, and instead of Chad, it was Carlton Banks. Like, if you reference, like if it's a poor white kid and a rich black kid that have the same obstacles or privileges, it doesn't change anything because it's about the privileges for the obstacles, and it's not about faulting anybody. It's not about faulting, Carlton / Chad for having privileges. It's about not faulting Tyrone / Will for not having privileges. And with those privileges, there does some benefit, and it's like, okay, we're just recognizing, and so some of their merit is overcoming those obstacles, like if recognizing they had to overcome obstacles to get where they are, and so maybe they're not quite as far, but those obstacles they overcame count for something too. And those also, when you start getting into the workforce and things like that, that actually helps the company, right? So one of the things that I've been reading about that you probably know more about than me is how diversity actually improves the workforce. Can you expand?
Yeah, exactly. So think of it as think of it as you're trying to build a tapestry or weave a blanket, if you will. Okay? If you have all of the same kinds of fabric of yarn, let's say, because I knit, I crochet, okay? If you have a single strand of yarn, right, and it's all the same color and it's all the same thickness and all that, it's not very strong. If you pull on it, it's going to eventually pull apart, right? Whereas if you start interweaving different threads of yarn, different colors of yarn, different backgrounds of yarn, maybe you weave in some metal yarn. There is such a thing where you have gold or silver thread. If you start interweaving those things in together, so that's where you get the diversity, where you have different colors, different genders, different backgrounds, different what have you, then you start getting a much stronger fabric and much more, and frankly, in my opinion, a much more beautiful fabric, because all you now have, instead of one plain old color, you have all these different colors and all these wondrous different varieties that bring your fabric together and create a much stronger piece.
Right. Okay. So, and there are studies that prove that diversity actually improves the workplace. Are you familiar with any of those, or?
I am. Unfortunately, I don't really have any in front of me. The one that's, I think, typically referred to, though, was a study that was done where it showed that having diversity programs in place can actually improve corporate performance by up to about 20-26%. And what's important is not just having those diversity programs in place, but where the diversity programs report up to. So the key important part is not just having the diversity programs in place, but having that chief diversity officer report to your CEO, as opposed to putting it under your chief HR officer, your chief operations officer, or something like that, or just making it kind of a second thought. You want that DEI program reporting into your chief executive officer, because that puts them on the same level as everybody else on the board, and it gives it the same amount of importance, and it shows to your employee base, we take diversity seriously. Because
Right.
DEI isn't just about your people, it's about your organization as a whole. So it can include things like your sustainability. It's very often you'll see DEI programs also have your corporate social responsibility as part of your DEI program. And I think that's very important, because that tells you the success and the health, not just of your organization internally, but also externally, how your organization is impacting the greater world around you.
So, the I was kind of thinking of an analogy of somebody that all they ever eat is mashed potatoes, like meatloaf with mashed potatoes and gravy. They go to the same diner every day, and they just have meatloaf with mashed potatoes and gravy. And it's not that there's anything, that's a great meal. You know, I love meatloaf with mashed potatoes and gravy, but it's not the only thing I ever want to eat. So he starts, he meets somebody, and she encourages him to start exploring. So he gets out his, his map, and he starts looking at all the different restaurants around him. And there's like just a whole variety of restaurants around him. And, so he starts tracking all the different restaurants, and he tries some Chinese food, and he tries some sushi, and he tries some Cajun food, and he tries fried chicken, and he just starts going to all these different restaurants and trying all these different foods. And on the one hand, obviously all these restaurants are benefiting by his business, because he's using their business. So this benefits them, but it also benefits his, as his experience of food and culture expands, so he becomes a larger person, not necessarily physically, but maybe if he's eating too much, but you know what I mean? Like he becomes a better person, more cognizant of different things. And so I think sometimes we just look at diversity in terms of measurables and not how much just being around different kinds of people can help individual workers, and then that individual help has a sort of a synergetic effect to where the actual quality of people improving helps improve the quality of the business. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It does. Absolutely. Absolutely. So a great case in point for you. Okay. So I'm autistic. I'm neurodivergent. Okay. And one of the things that that neurodivergent people, whether it's ADHD, autistic, what have you, have a tendency to like to do is what's called body doubling. Okay.
Mhm.
And that's where you're not necessarily working together on a project, you're just being in the same room with one another,
Mhm.
doing your own things. And it's a really interesting situation because for some autistic people or neurodiverse people, being in an office type scenario can actually be very overwhelming for them mentally. Um, but in a situation where you have one other person in a room with them doing what's called body doubling, where you're just kind of doing your own thing individually, it's actually very beneficial. You actually see productivity increase with both individuals. So we were looking at implementing a program where you could find a body doubling buddy, where you could say, hey, I need somebody to body double with me for an hour, around this time. And somebody could come in and say, yeah, I got time around that time. Let's do the thing. And they get on a Teams call, and they're not talking with each other necessarily. They're just sitting there doing their work while they're on the Teams call, and thereby increasing their productivity.
Mm.
It's things like that you really start looking at the difference in how do you change your productivity? How do you think outside of the box?
Mhm.
Right? That in ways that you may not necessarily have thought of before. It's when you start looking at those things, like the fact that often LGBT people don't necessarily always have children. Some do, some don't. But on average, most LGBT people have more disposable income than cisgendered heterosexual people do. And because of that, there are things that you maybe want to look at marketing towards them
Mhm.
in a new or different way than you necessarily would have thought about doing with cisgendered straight people, because they have that disposable income to go do.
Mhm.
Maybe it's
That
they
makes
want to
sense.
take their niece nephews to Disney World, or right. So it changes how you think about, well, how do I want to market this, or who can I market this to? And so by having that diverse background in place, it makes you think about what you can offer. It makes you think about what you can do, how you can do it, where do you go about doing it in all these different wonderful, new, and exciting ways. Whereas if you got a room full of, cis-het white guys, they're all going to think in one single direction.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
yeah.
that makes your business weaker.
So you're not, if you just have a bunch of cis hetero straight white guy, well, I guess anyway, they're not going to be sitting there going, now how does um how would gay people think about this? Or like, I don't know if you ever saw Blackish,
Right.
but they had the black guy explain the black the black audience to them all the time, or like why black people would want to buy this shoe or that shirt or whatever, or wouldn't, like why these marketing campaigns.
Right.
So they have their like token black guy to like black explain everything to them. And if you don't have that person in the room, like then you just have a lot of ignorance.
Exactly. You don't know what you don't know. Whereas when you start bringing in people from these marginalized communities, they can start telling you, hey, you might want to think about doing things this way, because in my community, we're not seeing this product at all, and here's why.
So just so everybody knows, if I break up a little bit now and then, there's a big storm going on outside. So I'm glad Care Bear came back inside before. My cat came back inside right before, and he was so sweet. He came in and he jumped up on my lap a little bit and said, "I'm okay," and then he ran back out like he knew I was worried about him. Anyway, so the net, like related to that, there's so on your website you talk about unconscious bias. What is that like? Because I think that sometimes, if I can, and this is about race, but it's also about like homophobia or whatever. There, like there's different biases, and people, I think in some ways we almost need to take the stigma out of some words like racism or homophobia, because I think most people, like 90% are not racist in terms of they don't hate black people. But I think most people, including most, I think, what's his name? I can't think of his name. It starts with an I. Anyway, the anti-racist guy. What is his name? How to Not Be an Anti-Racist.
I have a really great book, actually. I just picked it up the other day. It's called Me and White Supremacy by Layla F. Saad.
No, that's
really great book.
But anyway, the reason I was bringing this up is even he says that he has racist thoughts, and I think everybody does have racist thoughts. They're racist inclinations, racist.
So let me quantify that. Let me quantify that. Okay, so unconscious bias. Everybody, I don't care who you are, right. Everybody has unconscious biases. Okay, an unconscious bias is, it's. Let's go with a cisgendered heterosexual man, okay? Maybe sees a drag queen walk into a men's bathroom. Well, it's a men's bathroom, so of course a drag queen is going to go into a men's bathroom, right? And maybe feels a little bit uncomfortable because it's a drag queen. It's not something you've ever seen before. You're not sure how to act around it. You're kind of like, and it makes you a little uncomfortable, okay? That's unconscious bias. You're like, I'm not, this is, and this really, I think, kind of ties into, fight or flight. If it's unknown, you're not sure how to act around it, so you're like,
exactly. That's what I'm saying is like, you're gonna, like, those thoughts might pop up, and when they pop up, the thing is not to retreat from them, but to like engage that thought and reject it. Exactly. Like actively reject it and say, no, I have no reason to be afraid just because a transgender person walked into the same bathroom as me. They are not a threat. I reject that thought. And then as you get used to that, the fear starts to go away. Exactly. Those subtle things. And I think that's where when I say we need to take the stigma out of things, like we need to embolden people and encourage people to have the courage to shut down those thoughts, to recognize they're there. Because I don't think we're going to defeat racism by shaming every person that ever had a racist thought. I think we're going to defeat racism by letting people know those subtle things. Just because we do live in a racist culture that has a racist history, those things are going to pop up, and the only way to kill them are their weeds, and the only way to get rid of weeds is to pluck them out. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's dual-fold. So number one, recognize that you have that unconscious bias, and yes, address it. What is it about this situation that's making you uncomfortable? Because when you recognize that, yes, that's a fear response, then you can say, okay, what about this is making me uncomfortable? It's because I'm scared of this.
Mm-hmm.
Do you really think that this is going to happen? No. Okay, then why are you afraid of it? Okay, well, then you can address the fear and process it and go on. Okay. It's also about addressing historical behaviors. So we have in our history a lot of colonialistic mindsets that
Mm-hmm.
I think fuel those unconscious biases that, make us think, angry black man is going to hurt us and do all the damage in the world. No, they're not. An angry black man is angry because of their situation currently, and they have a right to be angry. Or a person, a gay person who's constantly been suffering from homophobia, or being accused of spreading AIDS. They have a right to be angry about that situation. They have a right to be frustrated with that situation. And it's your responsibility as somebody who's not in that marginalized community
Mm-hmm.
to address what is making you afraid of that person, and how do we go about dismantling colonialistic mindsets and creating a better overall human culture.
Right.
Yeah.
So give me an example of a colonial mindset.
Racism as a whole is a colonialistic mindset. The mindset that Black people or any person of color, quite frankly, is less than. They're not less than.
Mhm.
They are human, just like you. The thought that a gay person is somehow less than, or a non-binary or a trans person is somehow less than. It's that concept that where I'm better than you because of XYZ reason. Okay. And
Mhm.
and it's really about, we are all human beings. We all bleed the same, we all feel the same, we all have the same issues. We all just want to live our lives. Really all it's about. And breaking those mindsets and those cultural assumptions that I'm better than you, you're better than me. No, nobody's better than anybody. Get that out of your mind. Everybody is just doing the best they can with what they have. Live and let live, and leave them alone. I don't need somebody telling me you're wrong because you're non-binary. That's terrible thinking. And there's only two genders. Gender is a social construct. We created that here. It doesn't come about from what's here.
And it's not universal across all societies, right? The idea that there's only two
Exactly.
genders. Like there are plenty of societies
Exactly.
that have recognized transgender people
Yeah.
for millennia.
Yep. Exactly.
So now, what are microaggressions, and how are they related to these unconscious biases?
Yeah. So microaggressions, that's when you let your fear kind of run with you a little bit. So let's say that let's say that you're a little bit homophobic. You have some fear about, homosexuals or gender non-conforming people. Okay. And you're not really recognizing that fear is there. And you're
Mhm.
feeling threatened. Okay. So what you do is you do these little microaggressions where you might act in a passive aggressive manner to display that you're feeling threatened by this thing. Okay, so let's take the drag queen example. All right, you know, you might go and make a derogatory comment in passing. Oh, nice dress. Okay, that's a microaggression. Okay, making a woman feel uncomfortable in an elevator. That's a microaggression. Okay, it's acting in a way, it's engaging in that fear. That's a microaggression. Okay, so you're taking that fear and you're turning it into an action.
But the action is like more subtle. It's not like an actual, like it's, how is it microaggression from just being aggressive?
So it's exactly that. It's a micro, it's small. An aggression would be a drag queen walks into the bathroom to use the bathroom that's standing next to you, and you go out and punch them. That's an aggression, right? Whereas a microaggression is you're doing something small to do, think of it as like a threat display by an animal. It's, you know, like when a cat hisses at you. Okay, that's that you can think of it like that way, as opposed to doing like an actual swat at you with their claws. That's actual aggression. Whereas a microaggression is more of a threat display of saying, I feel threatened by you, therefore I have to challenge you and show you I'm bigger and badder and tougher than you. That's a microaggression.
So when you get into diversity training, how does diversity or DEI training or whatever, how does that help with inclusion and relate to inclusion? And how does that in turn help with things like unconscious bias and microaggressions?
Yeah. So with DEI training, okay, the goal is to understand that, number one, everybody has unconscious bias, and recognize that unconscious bias is there. Okay. Number two, it's increasing a person's emotional intelligence to recognize, hey, this is an unconscious bias I have. I have a fear of gay people. I have a fear of trans people. I have a fear of black people. Okay, and get you to look at what does that unconscious bias look like. Then it gets you to start thinking about, well, what's driving that fear? And if you can figure out what's driving that fear, then you can say, okay, that's unrational and I'm being stupid and don't do that. Okay, because when you address that unconscious bias and recognize it's there, you stop doing it. Okay.
What would you say to people that are, you know, like, and I ask this because people say it all the time to me, but I'm not afraid of gay people. I just disagree with them and I'm tired of having it shoved down my throat.
Well,
when you think the choice of words there,
would turn around and say,
did you freeze up? Is that me or is that you? Oh,
so you kind of broke up there a little bit because your storm is interfering, I think, a bit.
okay.
If somebody said, you know, I don't dislike gay people, I just don't necessarily want to see them out, and I actually had this happen with my own father. Okay, my father was raised in a time where, you know, you hid being gay, you hid being gender non-normative, you hid all that, you weren't publicly out. Okay, my existence and how I present to the world is not up for debate by anybody else. My existence and how I choose to present is my existence and how I choose to present. I'm not shoving it down your throat. I'm not doing anything to threaten you. Because to me, what you're telling me with that statement is you feel threatened by me, therefore I should hide what I am and how I present. And I'm going to ask them, what is it about me that you feel threatened by? What is it about me that scares you so badly? And a lot of times, you'll find what's very interesting is a lot of times people feel threatened by it because they've had those feelings on their own of themselves.
Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson. Sorry.
You have these individuals, though, who, I mean, like, how many times have we heard about pastors or politicians who are horrendously homophobic, who are transphobic, who then get caught in some kind of a scandal where they were having relations, shall we say, with an underage gay prostitute? Okay, the reason that they're spouting it is because they're afraid that it's in themselves. And instead of being afraid of it, and a lot of times that fear is engendered from, family members and others around them, instead of being afraid of it, be willing to explore it. What's wrong if you explored, your sexual orientation? What's wrong if you explored your gender identity? I didn't start exploring my own gender identity until about 2019, after my father passed away. And that was when I finally felt comfortable enough and safe enough to be able to say, you know what? I want to start playing around with this. I literally went from having hair down to here to this. I walked into a barber and I said, hey, how do you feel about chopping off hair? And little barber was like, hairdresser was like, oh, you need a trim? And I said, no, like, you got clippers. And he went, ah! And freaked out.
Did you sell the hair for a wig or?
No, I just cut it all off. I literally went from middle of my back to a skin fade.
Wow. So even though they might not recognize, they're not afraid. Like a lot of times they'll say, oh, I'm not afraid of you. And it's like, there is a fear there, but it's a fear of finding out something about themselves they don't want to admit to.
Exactly. It's like, why do you fear Black people? Do you think you're going to be attacked by one? Do you feel you're going to be SA'd by one? What's driving that fear? So when you start looking at that fear and exploring that fear, then you can say, okay, let's talk about this fear and what is it that's driving it and how do you resolve it?
What is a hacker? I don't even know what a hacker is. Oh, hackers and coders and no accountants. Yeah, because there should be account. So Adolf Hitler.
Get me started on that.
Yes, there should be accountants, but they didn't pass the white supremacy test. So I think there's only. I think it's. I would put this a different way. Why are there only white supremacists on the Doge team, and why is it only marginalized people and people of color that are being affected by it? But what we can talk about that after Teri leaves here. We're trying to stick on this. This is a great topic to discuss. So the unconscious bias microaggression. So now I think we've kind of like building up to this. What is inclusive leadership and how does that relate to what we've been talking about?
That's a great question. So inclusive leadership is really about, it's really about a leader who makes a conscious choice to say, I'm going to do the work on myself. I'm going to look at my own microaggressions. I'm going to look at my own unconscious biases and I'm going to understand what's triggering those things and learn ways to, change that behavior, and to understand that everybody in my team, the more diverse team that I have, the stronger that my team is, the better my results.
So, like, one thing I've been looking at is just the idea of inclusion is different than just the idea of hiring somebody. Like, you can hire somebody and really not include them. They're there, they're
Yeah.
filling the
Oh,
token role,
absolutely.
but you don't consider what they think. You don't, like, make them feel a valued member of the team. Inclusion goes
Yep.
beyond hiring. Like, and it's one of the things I've been looking at, like, and I, if you weren't here earlier, quotas are illegal, and they've always been illegal. And, since the 70s, the Supreme Court has ruled on it. Race quotas are illegal. DEI and affirmative action and all of that stuff has nothing to do with race quotas. That is a right-wing myth that is entirely fictional and made up, and has nothing at all to do with what we're talking about. DEI is not about hiring people that don't have merit over people that have merit because of race. It is not, it would be illegal. It's unconstitutional. The 14th Amendment, it would be a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Whether it's hiring black people over white people or white people over black people, it's illegal. Yeah. So it's like, that is not a discussion. However, that is a myth that is propagated. So now if somebody sees a black pilot, and I'm talking to you, Charlie Kirk, if somebody sees a black pilot and thinks, oh, they're not qualified, like, that is because of that quota myth. And that's why a lot of people, like, even affirmative action people or DEI advocates, are against quotas, or against the idea of quotas, because there's already such negative feedback on just hiring people at all. Like, if you're a black person that was hired, then you must not be qualified. That's their view. But nobody ever asks.
Yeah.
Nobody ever asks if Pete Hegseth is qualified for his job.
Right. So DEI programs and DEI data. I get asked a lot of, DEI programs and data. Well, aren't you just looking at the number of black people, or the number of queer people, or the number of this, that, the other that you've got in your organization? Well, yes, we do. We want to monitor that because we want to make sure that we have a good level of diversity in the organization, right? So you can't know if you've got a good mix of people unless you're actually monitoring the mix of people, right? The other part about it, though, that's equally, if not more important, in my opinion, is, are you getting input from those communities about how you run your business? Okay, so for an example, let's look at policies. Okay, your company has policies of how you're going to do business. Your company has policies on your benefits. Your company has policies on all kinds of things, right? You want to reach out to those marginalized communities, and you want to ask them, how do you think we can make our policies better? And they give you some feedback. A good case in point is, we want to make all of our policies gender neutral. So you want to take out she, he, gendered terms, and you want to just put in, words that keep it gender neutral. Okay. You want to offer benefits that are trans inclusive. So things like gender affirming care. And that's a whole different ball of wax that I could get into about gender affirming care and what that looks like, because most people think it's, it's all about transitioning. A nose job, if you have a broken nose, say, That's gender affirming care. It affirms your identity of what you look like in your mind. If you have too big of boobs, that's, and you want a reduction, that's gender affirming care, because it helps you align with your residual image of what you look like in your mind. Has nothing to do with, whether you want to transition to one gender or another. It's just how it's helping you align what's here and what's here. Okay. So
and
what
because
you're
of
doing,
like everything is related to, I do not understand why anybody else would feel like they deserve a vote in that.
right?
Like in
How
whether
I choose to do,
how you choose to treat yourself based on how you see yourself. Why would anybody else think that they have a right to an opinion on that? I never understood that.
right. Right. Well, and it's just like bodily autonomy. Bodily autonomy is not subject for debate. It's not. Your bodily autonomy should be your bodily autonomy, and what you do with your body, how you do your body, is completely and totally up to you. Period.
Exactly.
And it should make no difference on what gender you are. Male, female, queer, whatever's in between. If you want to put 20 holes in your face with piercings and tattoos and plugs and whatever, I may not like it because I think it looks kind of gross, but I'm like, hey, you do you. If that makes you happy, rock on.
Right.
Knock yourself out. I'm not gonna do it to me because I'm kind of like, yeah, no, I've got my earrings, I'm good. I've got my ink, I'm good.
So like back to the inclusive leadership, it's not just about leading a diverse group. It's about learning to relate to everybody. Like a part of the leadership is learning to relate to all the different types of people, and in doing so, that is a leadership, that you're leading other people to do the same. You're making it inclusive and not just hires.
Yes, exactly. Because in all honesty, it's not just about the intelligence. It's not just about your excellence. It's about, do you fit with the rest of the team? And how do you fit with the rest of the team? Because there's a whole myriad of things that you bring as you to an organization. And no, not everything is going to fit, and that's okay. But you want enough things to fit that it's not going to cause an issue with the functioning of your team and your organization, right? You're wanting to create cohesion. You're wanting to create strength. You're not wanting to create weakness. Now, one thing I think is important to look at is, say you bring in a person who maybe does a bit of disruption. Okay. Disruption isn't necessarily a bad thing.
When you say disruption, what kind of disruption do you mean? Do you mean that like, they're being disruptive in terms of how they're treating other people, or just being disruptive and they're being themselves and other people are bothered by it?
Right. And that's a great question. And I think it depends on the situation. It's, maybe a person is disabled, okay, and they don't think like, or they're neurodiverse, and maybe they don't think like the rest of your team does. The rest of your team is, very precise, very measured. They go in step, and they follow a regular pathway. Well, maybe you bring in somebody who's, ADHD, and they're all over the place, and they're going 90 miles a minute. Is that disruptive to your team? Yes, potentially. But here's the thing. Does that disruption impact you positively or negatively? There is the question. Does it make it painful? Okay, so that's the part of being an inclusive leader you got to look at is if they're being homophobic, if they're sexually harassing your female employees, that is a negative disruption, right? That is a disruption that is going to damage your team, okay? And that's the kind of person you don't necessarily want on your team because they're doing harm to your other team members, right? Whereas if you've got somebody who's ADHD and it's forced because of how they see the world, how they interact with the world, how they just function, is disruptive, but it's not necessarily good or bad, it just kind of is. And people are uncomfortable with it. Mainly it's just because they're just not used to how this person acts, and it's disrupting the cycle of how your team works, and they're having to make some adjustments to how that person works. That's not negative disruption, that's just disruption, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. My wife has ADHD, so it makes absolute sense. It's taken me 25 years to figure out they're you know, like I'll say you know, are you gonna, she'll say, I'm gonna go do the dishes, and then she'll start doing the dishes, and then she'll need to do something else to get the dishes done, so she'll start doing that, but then she'll need to do something else to get that done, and then she needs to wash the dish towels before she can do anything. And so I'll go in, I'll see her doing the laundry, I'll say, I thought you were going to do the dishes, and she'll say, that's what I'm doing. Like, yep. it all connects in her. Yep. So it's more learning that with ADHD people, I could write a book on this. It's learning about their thought process and figuring out they do have a thought process. It's just different than mine. And I am definitely more hyper focused. I don't know if that's a spectrum thing or not, but I'm more hyper focused than, like, if I have a task to do, I literally cannot do anything else until that task is done. Like, my brain will not rest until that's done. So I'll just I'll forget to eat for like 18 hours and just tunnel through until I'm done. And then once I'm done, then I can relax. But it's like sort of the opposite. I'm like, and I think that might be a different thing on the spectrum, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I know what you mean. That's my point.
Right. So, and that's really what an inclusive leader learns about, is they learn the difference between an individual who brings in a negative disruption, meaning, you know, somebody who is homophobic, somebody who is racist, etc., and they're bringing in a negative disruption, versus somebody who may be bringing in a neutral or a positive disruption, right? So that disruption, is it uncomfortable? Yes, but does it ultimately wind up being potentially a positive thing because it challenges your team members to work in new and different, interesting ways? Yes.
Okay,
it's
so
not necessarily bad. It's just is.
But let's say you've got a bunch of coder types that are all hyper focused and all just trying to tunnel through, and then they get this ADHD coworker that's like just hopping around all over the place, and so it starts to cause some I wouldn't say hostility, but discomfort in the workplace. How would an inclusive leadership go about resolving that issue? Would they tell the other coworkers not to worry about it? Would they tell the ADHD person to, you know, like, do better? Or would they have a team meeting and just kind of, you know, help everybody understand each other? Like, how would you as an inclusive leader resolve that issue?
And I would look at it from the position of, okay, first off, you want to empathize. You know what? I'm really sorry you're having that challenge with this individual. That sounds really incredibly frustrating. Let's talk about that challenge, right? And I would bring that person, the ADHD person, in there and be like, okay, this is nothing against you. This is not a negative against you. This is a challenge that we're having, right? and look at what are ways that you can mitigate those problems or solve those problems or get the other person to think about this person's experiences and see it from their side. Okay. Another thing that I think is also very important to point out is a lot of times ADHD people, because they're all over the place, they see things and they catch things that neurotypical person may not necessarily see or catch.
Mm-hmm.
A great point, in fact. Okay, so I live in a neurodiverse household. I am autistic. My housemate is ADHD. Boy, isn't that a fun time. So I'm playing a video game. Oh yeah, it can be, but we work well together. So I'm playing a video game, right? And I'm going through a dungeon crawl. Okay, and one of the things that in this video game that you want to do is you want to be on the lookout for little pockets of treasure, you know, or resources or things like that, or maybe a person you got to go talk to. I don't always see those because I'm hyper focused on achieving the next quest line or the next goal. And she'll be in there watching it with me, be like, oh, you missed this over there, you missed that over there, you missed this or there. And that's the great thing about it is they're going to see things that maybe you didn't think about. They're seeing a problem. Hey, did you notice that this right here is a potential risk to your project timeline? You know, and you're like going, oh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, and that's the great part about it is because they're all over the place, they tend to notice those little details that because you're so hyper focused on getting the quest line done, you're not seeing all this other stuff.
So like maybe there's, you know, to
so
use your
it's really important for
so like using your video game analogy that you know like you get to the to where you're trying to get to and you need a key to unlock the door, and that key was one of those things that you walk past, and so now you've got to go back and research the entire dungeon to find the key. When if you had been paying attention or seen it the first time, you could have saved yourself all that time. So metaphorically, sometimes the ADHD person sees the key that all the other programmers would have missed. That's what you're like. You end up by involving everybody's different thought types. You end up saving time, even though sometimes it might feel like you're wasting time.
Exactly. And it's because of those differing perspectives that you get that because you have those diverse perspectives, that's where you get that strength from, is because you're seeing more of the picture, as it were.
And that's why diversity matters, because diversity, the more diverse you are, the more perspectives there are, the more things you see that you might not otherwise see. You're, you know, instead of just eating, you know, like metaphorical meatloaf and mashed potatoes and gravy, you've got like an entire world's worth of food. And so there is like, I don't know how to say it, but like your experience is better, but everything is
so,
you know.
I've got a really great analogy for this.
Okay.
I've got a really great analogy for this. So when we first started looking at Pluto, because I've been watching Astrium videos on YouTube lately. When we first started looking at Pluto, all you got to see was this, you know, gray amorphous blob.
Is it a planet?
Because we were looking at it maybe through the Hubble telescope.
Is it a planet?
They're still figuring that one out. I think it's considered a protoplanet now.
Oh wow.
Yeah. I don't think they know. It's a thing, and it's out there way far away from us, so you know, hey. However, then they went and they sent a probe to go, you know, do a kind of a drive-by, if you will. And they had that probe once it hit a certain amount of distance, they started taking pictures and more pictures and more pictures. And as it got closer, started taking pictures, a lot more pictures, right, of one particular section of Pluto, and the next one, and the next one. So you're kind of doing this thing here where you're going down and up and down and up, and you're taking all these pictures of little tiny sections of Pluto. And then they take that data and they put it all together. So that's your diversity, right? And they put it all together into an inclusive photo. And then suddenly you've got this rich, gorgeous, amazing picture of Pluto where you've got all this, red, amazing color. You find out there's this kind of a heart-shaped ice thing section here over here, and you've got all these craters, and you're seeing tectonic movement and all of this detail that you would not have had because you're taking one picture instead of 1,000 and merging them together. That's diversity and inclusion.
So, and so I think this is really helpful. I don't think it's a conversation that Elon Musk and Charlie Kirk are going to have, because I think that like to some people on the right, they're trying to force the idea that DEI just means hiring Black people that don't deserve jobs. But it's not just about race. It's about all kinds of people, and including all kinds of people. And really, I mean, like maybe a third of the American population is white dudes. And then even less than that, cisgender white dudes. It's like if you're like that's my where my meatloaf and mashed potatoes comes from, is like you're just typing in if you're just zeroing in on one type of person as being qualified, then you're losing out on everybody else. And the diversity that makes humanity so beautiful. It's not that there's something wrong with being a white male. I don't feel guilty or bad about being a white male, but I think there's beauty in humanity, and I think it's in the diversity of humanity. It's in the different cultures. It's in the different races. It's in the different viewpoints. It's in the different, ways people love each other. It's, I think they're, like one of the, I asked you about a movie that made you snot cry. One of the movies that I saw that made me snot cry was Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a different kind of love story. It's a love story between a mother and her daughter. And even a wife and her husband, but it was it wasn't a sexual love story. It was a years of being together love story. Like, I think we need to expand our idea of what it is for people to love each other. Diversity is all of that. It is about empathy. It's about love. It's about understanding other people. It's about exposing ourselves to those things. And as we do so, we become better people, And I think that is, I think it is the big issue. Elon Musk is an asshole, and he's an asshole because he's an isolated asshole. He thinks that only people that are like him can be heard. And he's the opposite of diversity. He's what happens when you just become a white supremacist, misogynist dickhead. And I'm being nice.
Yeah. To me, it's a very sad world to live in when you only want to be cis, het, white, and male. It's a very narrow world. One of my favorite movie lines, if we're talking favorite movies, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Do you remember
Ah,
that one?
yeah, the Kevin Costner one, right?
Kevin Costner one, the one where, we discovered that Kevin Costner cannot speak with the British accent to save his soul. But that's a different story for another day. There's a scene in it just after the Moor helps Little John's wife give birth, where he's sitting by the fire cleaning his hands from all the gore. And a little child walks up to him and she's got her finger in her mouth. She's very shy and whatnot. She's looking at him and he greets her, salam, little one. And she finally gets up the courage and she asks, "Did God paint you?" And he kind of chuckles at this and he thinks about it for a second. He's like, "For certain." And she says, "Why?" And he says, "Because Allah loves wondrous variety." And that statement, I think, has stuck with me throughout my entire life. We need diversity because deity loves wondrous variety.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't the world a more beautiful place when you have all of these wondrous colors and sounds and shapes in the world?
Yeah, and I think that extends to cultures and foods and music, and you'll notice that the white supremacists like to talk about European culture as being like the supreme culture or something. It's just as though European culture has not been heavily influenced by other cultures already, like that. It in some ways it's already a hegemonized culture, not it's been affected by so many different things. And like our music, our contemporary music is more affected by African heritage than it is European heritage in a lot of ways. And anyway, we won't go into all that, but I think that and it's not just from slavery either. It comes from Europe's interaction with sub-Saharan Africa before slavery was even a deal.
Well, and I think it's really important to point out something, okay? And I'm not necessarily talking when I say a colonial mindset, okay? That doesn't necessarily mean I'm referencing strictly white people, because white people were not the only ones to have slaves.
Right.
Okay. When I'm talking about when I'm talking colonial mindset, there's a really great book. Oh, good Lord, my brain just went completely blank on it. I'll have to find it and send you the information. That talks about power over versus power from within. And when you're talking about power from within, you're talking about giving people the power for themselves to live their life, to do what they need to do on their own, to make their own decisions about what they want to do and where they want to go and how they want to live. Whether that's, healthcare, education, where they want to work, how they want to work, do they want to get an education or not? That is absolutely within their realm of possibility to do, right? Whereas power over, which is a colonial mindset, is, no, I know what's best for you, therefore I'm going to tell you what I think you need to do. That is a colonial mindset. Okay, so it's not necessarily so much a white person versus not white person mindset, although I think the majority of issues is, nope, that's not the one. I'll look it up. I read it a long time ago. It's a great book, and I cannot think of it for the life of me. You watch. We'll get off of this thing. Yeah. 5 minutes after we get off of this, it's going to pop into my mind.
I hate it when that, like, there's a book where you read and it really leaves an impression, and then The only impression it doesn't leave you is the stupid title of the stupid book, and you can never remember it. Um, I've had books like that.
Right.
Are you a
Yeah.
big reader, Terry? Do you read a lot?
Yeah, not as much as I used to, but yeah, I love to read. I love learning. I love learning. Whether
I
it's, whether it's reading a book or listening to a podcast, watching a movie, I like learning. Yeah.
Yeah, ditto. That's me too. I I uh I've read literally thousands of books and probably read like 100 articles or so online every week. Like, and that's a conservative estimate. But I agree. Like, learning is such a
Yeah.
big thing, and I think it's a big part of diversity. It's about learning other people and other thought processes, and
Exactly.
why,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, and I think, I've just always I had my previous workplace. I've mentioned it before on this show. I think there were about eight. It was like a team of 170. They ended up laying off 2/3 of the team, but there were teams of 170. We had 6 team leaders. That was the highest rank. The next rank was trainer. That's what I was. And we had 3 trainers, and then below that you had 10 lead writers, and then each lead writer had a team of 10 people that they led. Um, and that was kind of more or less the leadership. And of those, so that was like 10, 13, 19 out of 19 people. I think there were maybe 4 or 5 um, straight white males. Um, and we had people of color, we had transgender people, we had women, we had straight women, we had gay women, we had a transgender man, all in the leadership. And so it was this team that was the most cohesive, understanding um, team that I have ever been a part of, because I think of our diversity, even to the point we had a meeting with the labor board. We were trying to we were unionizing, and actually they have unionized now. They went ahead and they were successful. And when we were meeting with the guy from the labor board, he said that we were the most united team he had ever seen. Out of all the labor unions he had ever dealt with, and our lawyer said the same thing. But I think that done rightly, uh, that diversity produces solidarity, not division. And that what happens with people like Elon Musk is they try to make it something divisive, and they're like, oh, why can't we unite behind Trump? And it's like, how can you unite behind a divider? It's
Mhm.
antithetical. What he's antithetical to uniting. And I think, like things like DEI are,
Yeah.
that is how you unite.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, there was a great a point that was made of Trump is what's considered a distributive negotiator. And this is an article I read here recently where Trump is a very distributive negotiator, where you have a limited amount of resources and your goal is to get as much of those resources as possible. So you're always going to have a winner, you're always going to have a loser. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas DEI, what it's really about is it's integrative and collaborative negotiating, where you recognize that there's an unlimited amount of resources.
Mm-hmm.
And, this group over here may need resources A, B, and C. This group over here may need D, E, and F. Well, this one over here has D and E. This one's got A. This one over here maybe has, something else. and you all talk together and everybody gets what they need just by sitting and talking to one another. I say, okay, what do you need? You need this. Okay, what do you got? Well, I've got this. Okay, I've got this part. I'll give you that if you'll give me this. Okay, great. Well, I don't have this part and I need this part. This person has that and you've got that. And you start collaborating and talking about who needs what, right? That's where equity comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I watched your YouTube with Wendy last week, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
Great discussion, by the way.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. And that's really where inclusion and equity start coming into play. Is you've got different things that different people need. The point I'm trying to make is if you've got somebody who has a distributive mindset instead of a collaborative mindset, they're not able to build diversity because that just doesn't work in their mind. How can you build diversity if you're not willing to collaborate on what you need?
It seems like it's more like it's just going to issue in combativeness more than
it is. Exactly.
So you have different teams competing against one another rather than vying together to come to the common goal.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that is a big difference. I'm gonna be doing a whiteboard video, kind of fusing what I've learned from you and from Wendy. I feel like I've really expanded my understanding between the two interviews. And I wish people could watch it. If you have a MAGA relative, and you can Clockwork Orange them to a chair, make them watch both videos. I don't know how open they're going to be to it, but I do feel like these are conversations we need to have with people to, especially like, some of your questions that, to what are you afraid of? And, things like that would help people to like really get through.
Mm-hmm.
What are you really afraid of? What are you really concerned about? Because either, like, do you really think that how many illegal immigrants have walked into your house and, raped you or, raided your refrigerator or whatever? Like, these things are imaginary. And it's like, why are you afraid of those things? What is it that you're really afraid of? Are you afraid of losing your job? And is it really, by getting them through, like, to really consider what they're actually afraid of, you can help them understand why these are not genuine fears, but to, like, maybe address the genuine fears.
Right. And I think that's really what this administration is about. Yeah. I think that's really what this administration is all about, is driving fear. They want you afraid. They want you to disconnect from those around you because they're the enemy. Mm-hmm. Who's the enemy? Why are they an enemy? Instead, you need to be asking these questions of, well, just because somebody comes to this country, why are they my enemy? What is it about them? Are they outright, do they have a gun to my head? No. Are they going in and trying to take my job? No. Are they trying to essay me in the bathroom? No. Okay, then what about it is making you afraid? If they're not doing any of these things, why are you afraid of them? And it's that fear mongering that gives that power over.
We had a while back, we had a political psychologist on, and she was really amazing. And she was explaining how fear is the number one thing to shut down logic. Like when you're afraid, the last thing you do is think. And like, if it made me think of, that commercial for Geico or whatever, where They're joking about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and they're like, the guy is coming, they're trying to run from the mad slasher guy, and they're like, where do we go? What do we do? And then one girl says, why don't we just go get in that running car? And then the other guy says, no, let's go hide behind these chainsaws. And so they go and they hide behind the chainsaws. And then it's like the talk about Geico or whatever. I'm not quite
Right.
sure how it ties into the product, but the idea that we do stupid things when we're afraid is very real, and that's why it's funny.
Right. Well, and that's because fear, which is it triggers your fight or flight, and again, it ties back into microaggressions. Why do you do microaggressions? Because you're afraid.
Mhm.
What are you afraid of? When you address the fear, you realize I don't have any fear, then you stop the microaggressions, right? Fear, which drives your fight or flight, breaks your logic.
Yeah. So
it breaks your logic.
We can do two things then. We can take possession over our own mind and rationally set aside those fears by rationally addressing those fears. And what am I afraid of? Like, why does this, and we've talked about Black people or gays or whatever. Why is this fat person in the elevator? Why does that make me repulsed? Or,
Right.
all the other different kinds of negative reactions we have to people just because they are not the same as us. Like, to really, instead of because I think what we do is we know that the thought is wrong and there's a little guilt and shame involved in it. And so what we do is we have these microaggressions. It's kind of an impulse to just act out at them. They're the problem. If they weren't fat, I wouldn't feel this way. If they weren't gay, I wouldn't feel this way. If they weren't Black, I wouldn't feel this way. So it's their fault for not that.
Yep.
And when you do that, then you're accepting that thought. You're receiving that thought into your own head, rather than saying, look, this thought came into my head, but this is a product of my culture, of my surroundings, of the thousands of TV shows I've watched that, show that fat people are gross or that Black people are, violent or whatever. Like, this is a thought I can reject. And you know what? This is honestly something that I have put into practice that has really made a massive difference in my life. You know what I do when I see a stranger that makes me feel uncomfortable, Teri? That kills every one of those thoughts. I say hello. I just say, hey, how you doing? And then they are just as friendly back, and all of that shit dissolves just right away. It just dissipates into nothing. Like, just a friendly greeting could solve so many problems in this universe. Like, but like, we need to kill those thoughts as soon as they emerge in our head, and we'll find after you've done that a few times, they don't come anymore. Like, you stop having these reactions when a Black person or a gay person or a fat person gets on an elevator with you. You just see a person. And I like, I hate words like colorblind or whatever. Like, they're Black, but you don't care that they're Black, and either consciously or unconsciously. So
I want to adjust that thinking a little bit. I care that they are Black. I care that they are gay. I care that they are fat, or whatever other descriptor you want to put to it.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
It is a part of what makes it. No, it should. It is a part of what makes them uniquely beautiful and amazing and valuable. It is because of their experiences as a Black person, as a gay person, as a trans person, as a whatever person. And we are all multitudes of different things, right? I'm not just a queer person. I'm not just a fat person. I'm a yarn artist. I'm a musician. I'm an avid reader. I'm a nerd. there are a lot of things that make up who I am as a person, and it's not just that one thing. That's where intersectionality is so important and valuable. Okay.
Intersectionality is
a lot of times.
Intersectionality is one of those words that the right is trying to turn into a pejorative, and I think it's really essential to understand that is a thing. Like we don't see black people, and like there's black people and there are women and there are black women. But it's not just black women go through everything black people go through and everything women go through. There is a specific challenge to being a black woman that is more than just being a black person or more than just being a woman. And a lot of it nowadays is like they have the most challenges to deal with, but they're also expected to be the heroines. They're expected to be the ones that rise above everything and save the universe. Like, even though they're the most disrespected, they're also the ones that are, the most is expected from. And that's a unique, intersectionality of challenges to them. And so,
right. Well, a really good point that a lot of far right people will engage in. Okay. It is perfectly acceptable for you to be a veteran.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of right-leaning companies will hire veterans. Oh, we absolutely support our veterans, 100%. Okay? But do you support your veterans of color?
Mm-hmm.
No. Do you support your disabled veterans? No. Do you support your gay, lesbian, or trans veterans? Oh, no, can't do that. You can't be selective in what you're willing to support in diversity. Doesn't work that way.
Or even liberal veterans. Like if I have my service, my military service gets questioned because I don't support Trump. Like, it wasn't valid, even though he didn't have military service and I did. My service is not valid because I don't support him. Like, there's this ideological notion that veterans have to be Republicans that really pisses me off, and pisses off a lot of other veterans, by the way. Sorry.
Yep. And that's the thing, is we're not just one thing. I am a multitude of things, just like you're a multitude of things that make up you as uniquely you.
Mm-hmm.
So, instead of thinking that only people that are similar enough to me are worthy, you start looking at what is the beautiful array of things that make up this world. I value you because you're a veteran. I value you because you're male. I value you because you read a ton of books. I value you because you're married to an ADHD person. Those are all things that are worthy of being valued. It's not that you don't care about them. It's that they don't negatively impact your experience with them.
That's
but
right.
You still value them for what they are.
Yes, that's right. So we are way over, but you told me you were okay with that, so but that kind of exhausts my questions for you today, and I really do appreciate all your feedback and everything you had to think about, or gave us to think about. So Golf, are you still around? Or I don't know if you're still around. If you're still around, let me know, and we can talk about what you wanted to talk about. But Teri, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I will send you a link and everything for this afterwards if you'd like to share it with your family or your housemate or whoever, or your bestest MAGA friends. Do you have MAGA friends, or have they all cut you out of their life?
Thank you so much for having me. I have some MAGA relatives. unfortunately, but you don't get to choose who your relatives are. So, hey, I do know a few people who voted for Trump, and um, I hope that one day, they recognize the damage that this individual is doing to our country and our economy and our culture, and that they'll make different choices in the future. But thank you so much for having me today. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully we get to do it again someday in the future.
Thank you. Oh, I have one more question for you. I noticed you have a little aquarium there behind you, or
Yeah.
maybe not an aquarium. And you got these like bottles with these things on top of it or something. What kind of aquarium is that?
These things, those are actually lights.
Oh, those are lights. Okay.
So those are lights. So this is a reptile tank. I actually have a bearded dragon.
A bearded dragon. What is a bearded dragon? I'm gonna look this up. Does he have a name?
Do you want to meet him?
Oh, we can meet him. Okay, they look pretty cute online.
Okay.
If you're into lizards.
Oh, sleepy boy. Come here, little man.
Does he do
He's
tricks?
giving me stink eye because I disturbed him. No. He just sits. You're a mess.
Does he know you and recognize?
Hello.
Wow, he's a big guy.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Hello, what's his name?
His name is Finn.
Hi, Finn.
He is Finn, short for Phoenix. He is 10 years old.
Wow.
And he is a bearded dragon.
And he likes to be petted. Wow, he's just very.
He loves to be. He's a very big cuddle. He's a very big cuddler.
Wow.
He loves to
Does he
snuggle.
like roam around the house, or is it like either you're holding him or he's in his aquarium?
Sometimes, yeah, we kind of have to keep an eye on him when he roams around the house, because he likes to play his version of hide and seek, which is to go hide under the most inconvenient thing to try to get him out from under, and he'll stay there.
Lizard's gonna lizard.
We actually, like, if the weather's good, which it's not today, unfortunately, it's a lizard. We'll take him outside in the backyard and let him sit out in the backyard and get some sun, and sunbathe and do his thing.
Do you have?
Yeah, he comes with us occasionally. We'll take him out. Do I have what?
Do you have cats? Do you have a cat?
I have a cat, yeah. And yeah, I have a cat. He pretty much ignores him. They ignore each other.
Okay. I don't know how my cat would be around a lizard. He might be afraid.
So I've lived in a house with multiple cats, and my cat, who oddly enough has anxiety, ignores him and is like, okay, you're just a funny smelling cat, and goes on about his day. I've had other cats I've lived with who are like, ooh, lunch. And we're like, yeah, no, not lunch, dude.
That's what I'd be concerned with my cat, yeah. My cat.
Thankfully, mine, yeah, like mine, so I will have Finn sitting up here on my chest. I'll be in my recliner. My cat will come up on my chest and he'll be like sitting here, and the lizard sitting here, and they just coexist peacefully.
So they're like,
I can't breathe because I'm like, oh my god, all the things on me, but yeah. So yeah.
How much does he weigh? A couple of pounds?
Maybe 1.5 pounds, if that. He's like just over a pound.
Does he ever ask to climb up on you?
Yep.
Aw, so he actually knows who you are.
Yeah, he knows I think who I am. I mean, I've been his human for 9 years now. I got him when he was a year old. So, but he's very chill. I've known other bearded dragons who like really don't like females or males for whatever reason. I had a friend of mine who had a beardy who hated her,
Wow.
but loved her partner. We don't know why.
Wow.
Don't have any idea why. But then again, I've had a cat who hated men, loved me because I was femme presenting at the time, tolerated my mother and my grandmother, but hated my father, hated my brother, but I was mommy, and you couldn't tell him I could do no wrong. And he's kind of, he's just very chill. Yeah, he's just kind of okay, cool.
Well, he's adorable.
Thank you.
I love pets. I think everybody should have pets. Anyway, on that note, I think we can now that we've met Finn, we can end the interview. I mean, like how do you go up from there? So thanks again for joining us, and I'll send you the link once I have it all finalized.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. Have a great day.
Okay, so we're